This will probably finish the World Bible edited by Robert O. Ballou. The Taoist holds the energy by letting the energy move that is not him. We're continuing from the works of Chuang Tze in Taoist scriptures. Conceit. Conceit and assurance, which lead men to quit society and be different from their fellows, to indulge in tall talk and abuse of others. These are nothing more than personal overestimation, the affection of recluses and those who have done with the world and have closed their hearts to mundane influences. Preaching of charity and duty to one's neighbor, of loyalty and truth, of respect, of economy, and of humility. This is but moral culture, affected by would-be pacificators and teachers of mankind, and by scholars at home or abroad, preaching of meritorious services, of fame, of ceremonial between sovereign and minister, of due relationship between upper and lower classes. This is mere government, affected by courtiers or patriots who strive to extend the boundaries of their own state, to swallow up the territory of others. Cursed be those who fight to extend borders. Cursed be those who fight to acquire slaves. Cursed be those who fight to obtain treasure. That is extra and fall. That's not Chinese way of saying it, but anyways. But in self-esteem, without conceit, in moral culture, without charity and duty to one's neighbor, in government without rank and fame, in retirement without solitude, in health without hygiene, there we have oblivion, absolute, coupled with possession of all things, an infinite calm, which becomes an object to be obtained by all. Such is the Tao of the universe, such is the virtue of the sage. Wherefore it has been said, in tranquility, in stillness, in the unconditioned, in inaction, we find the levels of the universe, the very constitution of Tao. The choice of Chuang Tze. Chuang Tze was fishing in the Ballou when the prince of Ballou sent 2 high officials to ask him to take charge of the administration of the Ballou state. Chuang Tze went on fishing, and without turning his head, he said, I have heard that in Ballou there is a sacred tortoise, which has been dead now some 3,000 years. Well, every dead tortoise would be a sacred one now, wouldn't it? And that the prince keeps this tortoise carefully enclosed in the chest on the altar of his ancestral people. Now would this tortoise rather be dead and have its remains venerated, or be alive and wagging its tail in the mud? It would rather be alive, replied the 2 officials, and wagging its tail in the mud. Turtles sometimes do wag their tail, and same with tortoises. Begone, cried Chuang Tze. I too will wag my tail in the mud. The death of Chuang Tze's wife. When Chuang Tze's wife died, Huai Tze went to condole. He found the widower sitting on the ground, singing, with his legs spread out at a right angle, and beating time on a bowl. To live with your wife, exclaimed Huai Tze, and see your eldest son grow up to be a man, and then not to shed a tear over her corpse, this would be bad enough. But to drum on a bowl and sing, surely this is going too far. Not at all, replied Chuang Tze. When she died, I could not help being afflicted by her death. Soon, however, I remembered that she had already existed in a previous state, before birth, without form, or even substance. That while in that unconditioned condition, substance was added to spirit, and this substance then assumed form, and that the next stage was birth, and now by virtue of a further change, she is dead, passing from one phase to another, like the sequence of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And while she is thus lying asleep in eternity, for me to go about weeping and wailing, would be to proclaim myself ignorant of these natural laws. Therefore, I refrain. So, always connect your afterlife ideas to this life. The wisdom of the skull. Chuang Tze one day saw an empty skull, bleached but still preserving its shape. Striking it with his riding whip, he said, "Wert thou once some ambitious citizen, whose inordinate yearnings brought him to this pass, some statesman who plunged his country into ruin and perished in the fray? Some wretch who left behind him a legacy of shame? Some beggar who died in the pangs of hunger and cold? Or didst thou reach this state by the natural course of old age?" When he had finished speaking, he took the skull, and placing it under his head as a pillow, he went to sleep. In the night he dreamt that his skull appeared to him and said, "You speak well, sir, but all you say has reference to the life of mortals, and to mortal troubles. And death? There are none of these. Would you like to hear about death?" Chuang Tze having replied in the affirmative, the skull began, "In death, there is no sovereign above, no subject below. The working of four seasons are unknown. The existences are bound only by eternity. The happiness of a king among men cannot exceed that which we enjoy." Chuang Tze, however, was not convinced, and said, "Were I to prevail upon God to allow your body to be born again, and your bones and flesh to be renewed, so that you could return to your parents, to your wife, and to the friends of your youth, would you be willing?" At this, the skull opened its eyes wide and knitted its brows and said, "How should I cast aside happiness greater than that of a king, and mingle once again in the toils and troubles of mortality?" The dead sometimes are much better off than we are. The secret of life. A drunken man who falls out of a cart, though he may suffer, does not die. His bones are the same as other people's, but he meets his accident in a different way. His spirit is in a condition of security. He is not conscious of riding in the cart, neither is he conscious of falling out of it. Ideas of life, death, fear, etc. cannot penetrate his breast, and so he does not suffer from contact with objective existences. And if such security is to be got from wine, how much more is to be got from God? It is in God that the sage seeks his refuge, and so he is free from harm. Intoxicants do harm, even if people enjoy them a whole bunch. And that includes your medications and your coffees and all that. It's, just because you're not falling down drunk doesn't mean you're not using something like that. But all the things that we seek through drugs is available through spirituality. Confucius at the Cataract. Confucius was looking at the cataract at Lu Liang. It fell from a height of 30 gen, and from its foam reached 40 li away. No scaly, finny creature could enter therein. Yet Confucius saw an old man go in, and thinking that he was suffering from some trouble and desirous of ending his life, bade a disciple run along the side to try to save him. The old man emerged about 100 paces off, and with flowing hair went caroling along the bank. Confucius followed him, and said, "I had thought, sir, you were a spirit, but now I see you are a man. Kindly tell me, is there any way to deal thus with water?" "No," replied the old man, "I have no way. There was my original condition to begin with, then habit growing into nature, and lastly acquiescence in destiny, plunging in with the whirl. I come out with the swirl. I accommodate myself to the water, not the water to me, and so I am able to deal with it after this fashion." "What do you mean?" inquired Confucius. "By your original condition to begin with, habit growing into nature and acquiescence in destiny. I was born," replied the old man, "upon dry land and accommodated myself to dry land. This was my original condition. Growing up on the water, I accommodated myself to the water. That was what I meant by nature, and doing as I did without being conscious of any effort to do so, that was what I meant by destiny, the impossibility of possessing. Shun X Chiang, saying, "Can one get Tao so as to have it for one's own?" "Your very body," replied Chiang, is not your own. How should Tao be? If my body, said Shen, is not my own, pray whose body is it? It is the delegated image of God. Image belonging to God. Replied Cheng, your life is not your own. It is the delegated harmony of God. Your individuality is not your own. It is the delegated adaptability of God. Your posterity is not your own. It is the delegated exuviae of God. If you move, you know not how. You are at rest, but know not why. You taste, but know you are not the cause. But you taste, but know not the cause. These are the operation of God's laws. How, then, should get Tao so as to have it for your own? All these things are the vehicles for our souls. These vehicles that we are borrowing. All things after the kinds. Confucius said to Lao Tze, today you are at leisure. Pray tell me about your perfect Tao. Purge your heart by fasting and discipline, answered Lao Tze. Wash your soul as white as snow. Discard your knowledge. Tao is abstruse and difficult of discussion. I will try, however, to speak to you of its outline. Heaven cannot but be high. Earth cannot but be broad. The sun and moon cannot but revolve. All creation cannot but flourish. To do so is their Tao. But it is not from extensive study that this may be known, nor by dialectical skill that this may be made clear. The true sage will have none of these. It is an addition without gain, in diminution without loss, that the true sage finds salvation, unfathomable as the sea, wondrously ending only to begin again, and forming all creation without being exhausted. The Tao of the perfect man is spontaneous in its operation, that all creation can be informed by it without exhaustion. It is that Tao. In the middle kingdom, there are men who recognize neither positive nor negative. They abide between heaven and earth. They act their part as mortals, then return to the cause. The reality of the formless, the unreality of that which has form. This is known to all. Those who are on the road to attainment care not for these things, but the people at large discuss them. Attainment implies non-discussion. Discussion implies non-attainment. Manifested Tao has no objective value. Hence, silence is better than argument. It cannot be translated into speech. Better than say nothing at all. Better than say nothing at all. This is called the great attainment. So find a middle way, right? The Shariat in Sanskrit-based and Arabic-based languages. Where Tao is, well, I guess there could be some exception. Where Tao is, Tung Kwa Tze asked Chuang Tze, saying, what you call Tao, where is it? There is nowhere, replied Chuang Tze. Where is it not? Tell me one place, at any rate, where it is, said Tung Kwa Tze. It is in the ant, replied Chuang Tze. Why go so low down? Asked Tung Kwa Tze. It is in a terror, said Chuang Tze. Still lower, objected Tung Kwa Tze. It is in a potsherd, said Chuang Tze. Worse still, cried Tung Kwa Tze. It is in ordure, said Chuang Tze, and Tung Kwa Tze made no reply. The wise tender of horses. When the Yellow Emperor went to see Tao upon Tze mountain, Fang Ming was his charioteer. Chang Yu sat on his right. Chang Zhou and Se Paang were his outriders, and Kaang Hung and Hua Che brought up the rear. On reaching the wilds of Hsiang Chiang, these 7 sages lost their way, and there was no one of whom to ask the road. By and by they fell in with a boy who was grazing horses, and asked him, saying, do you know the Tze mountain? I do, replied the boy. And can you tell us, continued the sages, where Tao abides? I can, replied the boy. This is a strange lad, cried the Yellow Emperor. Not only does he know where the Chuang Tze mountain is, but also where the Tao abides. Come, tell me, pray, how would you govern the empire? I should govern the empire, said the boy, just the same as I look after my horses. What else should I do? When I was a little boy, I used to live within the points of the compass. My eyes got dim of sight. An old man advised me to mount the chariot of the sun and visit the wilds of Xiang Chiang. My sight is now much better, and I can continue to dwell without the points of the compass. I should govern the empire in just the same way. What else should I do? Xiang Chiang. The wilds of... Okay. Of course, said the Yellow Emperor. Government is not your trade. Still, I should be glad to hear what you would do. The boy declined to answer, but on being again urged, cried out, What difference is there between governing the empire and looking after horses? See that no harm comes to the horses. That is all. Thereby the emperor prostrated himself before the boy, and addressing him as divine teacher, took his leave. Go beyond the mere material conditions or the inflections of directions and all that. Become the solar principle as a leader, if you are to become a leader. Or, well, anyways. Chuang Tze on death. When Chuang Tze was about to die, his disciples expressed a wish to give him a splendid funeral. But Chuang Tze said, with heaven and earth for my coffin and shell, with the sun, moon, and stars as my burial regalia, and with all creation to extort me to the grave, are not my funeral paraphernalia ready to hand? We fear, argued the disciples, lest the carrion kite should eat the body of our master. To which Chuang Tze replied, Above ground I shall be food for kites. Below I shall be food for mole, crickets, and ants. Why rob one to feed the other? The way to Tao. Sky burials are about as disturbing as it gets. I mean, people groaning or screaming from the funeral pyre because it turns out they're still alive, or from the embalmer's table. That's not too nice either. Or to realize the machines have told you that the being's alive, and at least anyways, there's reasons for burial. The way to Tao. Nang Yung took some provisions, and after a 7 days' journey arrived at the abode of Lao Tze. Have you come from Kang Sang Chao? Said the latter. I have, replied Nang Yung. But why? Said Lao Tze. To bring all these people with you? Nang Yung looked back in alarm, and Lao Tze continued, Do you not understand what I say? Nang Yung bent his head abashed, and then looking up said with a sigh, I have now forgotten how to answer. In consequence of missing what I came to ask. What do you mean? Said Lao Tze. If I do not know, replied Nang Yung, men call me a fool. If I do know, I injure myself, and if I am not charitable, I injure others. If I injure myself. If I do not my duty to my neighbor, I injure others. If I do it, I injure myself. My trouble lies in not seeing how to escape from these three dilemmas. On the strength of my connection with Kang Song, I would venture to ask advice. When I saw you, said Lao Tze, I knew in the twinkling of an eye what was the matter with you, and now what you say confirms my view. You were confused as a child that has lost its parents. You would fathom the sea with a pole. You were astray. You were struggling to get back to your natural self, but cannot find the way. Alas, alas. If a rustic is sick, said Nang Yung, and another rustic goes to see him, and if the sick man say what is the matter with him, then he is not seriously ill. Yet my search after Tao is like swallowing drugs, which only increase the malady. I beg, therefore, merely to ask the art of preserving life. The art of preserving life, replied Lao Tze, consists in being able to keep all in one, to lose nothing, to estimate good and evil without divination, to know when to stop, to know how much is enough, to leave others alone and attend to oneself, to be without cares and without knowledge. To be in fact as a child will cry all day and not become hoarse because of the perfection of its constitutional harmony. It will keep its fist tightly closed all day and not open it because of the concentration of its virtue. It will gaze all day without taking off its eyes because its sight is not attracted by externals and motion. It knows not whether it is bound at rest. It is not conscious of doing anything, but unconsciously adapts itself to the exigencies of its environment. This is the art of preserving life. And I will finish that page and the next page and the page after that